Amy, hello, welcome back. How
Hi,
are you?
Adam. Thank you. I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for
Good.
having me.
You're very welcome. I'm looking forward to this. There's a couple topics just before we pressed record that you really want to dive into. I know you've got the spirit within you as far as a couple things. So yeah, and for those watchers or listeners, Amy is on here for the second time. So if you'd like to look at the previous episode, just to kind of give an introduction to Amy and everything, that's great. I mean, Amy, you can still introduce yourself now and sort of what you want to talk about today. I know you've written a book, which is very near dear to your heart, and also you want to work directly with women in many capacities. I won't be your spokesperson further than that. You can tell the audience how you feel, but yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for that. That's so kind. It is near and dear to my heart. My book is called A Second Chance, and it's a memoir and a handbook. I tell my story in the hopes of helping,
Right.
because I think as we know, we both agree that when you share your story, you give permission for other people to examine
Yeah.
and look at theirs. So
And I will say I read probably a good chunk of that book over a period of time when you sent it to me. And the amount of depth that you go to in your experiences is the vulnerability that you can take to that level for anyone that is willing to read that and think of someone else's experience. I think it's very liberating, even from my vantage point that might not know all of like kind of the things that you went through. And as a man, like I may not, but a lot of the elements that you went through, like you really had to strip down metaphorically to kind of bare your soul as far as that. I'm wondering if that was cleansing for you writing the book, or but I'm just curious about that. But yeah, it goes to depths that I would not have imagined before. So thank you for doing that.
My pleasure. It wasn't cleansing to write it. I don't think I would have been able to write it without being cleansed already and having gone through
Right.
it and having sort of gelled for many years with God. Like, okay, now I can finally tell this story without feeling so vulnerable.
Yeah.
But it was important for me to share those personal experiences and explain like the reclamation of my own soul and my own purpose and who I was raised to be and the good parts of my parents and my upbringing, because I was definitely hoodwinked into looking upon my background as a problem, and it wasn't.
Right.
It was custom built for me, and I got to learn through it. And so it was like reclaiming my heritage, my lineage, myself. And I wanted to go into that kind of detail because that's what delusion will do. I was
Yeah.
so deluded by the culture, and I was so deluded by chasing the world and chasing recognition and fame. And I mean, I was deeply involved in the music, and it meant a lot to me, and music still does. So it's not that it wasn't meaningful, but my aims were constantly tripping me up,
Right.
and they were a match to the culture, the dark side of the culture that we see now in full bloom.
Right.
And so it was detrimental. And there's a telemarketer calling me, sorry. It
That's
was
okay.
detrimental to my soul's growth. And the way out for me was listening carefully to other women tell the truth without shame. That
Right.
was the most significant way for me to understand that like I said, permission to look at myself came through that way
Yeah.
from others. And so I thought, well, could I package that? And I just started writing. And today is significant because I woke up this morning thinking, you're going on a podcast. This is something to discuss. And so I'll just drop it on you here, and
Yeah.
hopefully we won't
Let's
get
do
taken
it.
off YouTube. But when the COVID shots were removed from the schedule, which I think the childhood schedule by the CDC, which I think was yesterday or the day before, it was a big moment for me because a life-changing event for me was, as a stepmom, not a birth mom,
Yeah.
standing in between our kids who are like bonus kids or soul sons. I mean, I love them as my own, and I respect they are not, and they have a loving mother. And I just love them as my own. So I stood in between them and those shots. And it changed my life. And it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through.
Yeah.
And it was miraculous in nature also. And it helped me. I'm recommitted to my relationship with God and with Jesus Christ in a way that's totally different from before, which I was just kind of a lukewarm Christian, you know, sending God a list or a fax. Like, sorry, I don't think you got my fax. This is what I wanted.
Right. Right.
And instead it was true surrender to the will of God. Thy will be done. Thy will, not my will. And I mean, just to let people know like what that was like, it was knowing knowing that the boys did not need the shots.
Right.
Having carefully and diligently researched what may have been in them. And then my husband and I finally getting on board together, which was very difficult because he was not sure if what to do.
Yeah.
And so that was a passage of us getting on board. And then once we were on board together, it was like surrendering them to their mother's home, which she had every right to take them. Only one parent was necessary.
Right.
And so I would just pray on my face, like, please, God, please don't let her take them today.
Yeah.
Because I respected that she might.
Right.
But so I literally consider it a miracle. And somehow we all just muddled through and like waited. That was Oliver's big thing, was like, can we just wait? My husband's big thing was like, can we just wait?
Right.
And so it just feels like a big deal because it was the entrance into, so I had been doing the work that's in this book, which I learned from Dr. Pat Allen, who was my mentor and helped me personally and professionally. And I had been doing her work and teaching her work since 2017 in my first podcast, which was called Something Better.
Yeah.
So I knew about the right to veto. One of the principles of feminine energy behavior is your sacred right to veto, which we're seeing a real need for in women.
Right.
Like your right to veto, a lot of what's going on in the culture. Anyway, so that sort of opened, many people also call it like the sacred no. So it was like a deeper level entrance into that, because at the time that the shot was being pushed, and it was very pushed in the area where we lived, it was impossible to live. We weren't allowed into establishments, etc.
Right.
At that time, I sought help from Dr. Pat's male protege, and he was actually convincing us, he was like, well, you need to respect his wishes. And I was like, not if it's my body, I mean, and he actually was caught off guard because I was like, I learned from Pat that I have a right to decline anything coming into my body that I cannot accept. And I know, because I had done the research, that if he were to get this, that material could be sexually transmitted.
Right.
And so I found myself like on the hill that like, oh, I've found the hill I would be willing to die on. I am not budging.
Right.
And it was so difficult and so painful. I mean, painful to the point where I took a little sojourn for a few days just because my husband and I could barely communicate without arguing.
Yeah.
And I was just like unabashedly sitting outdoors by a stream in Utah where I went to hike and talk to God. And I was like, I'm just talking to God and people are just walking by and I don't even care. Someone who has cared what people think and been so desperate for approval is like out there, like, I don't even care. I'm at my absolute desperate moment. And sometimes those are the moments when God comes in. God, as you understand God, it's like, suddenly I do understand you. Suddenly I do feel I'm in a conversation with you. And so it was just like incremental, let's just do this one day at a time and see where it takes us. And I came back from that sojourn and I said to my husband, and I will never forget it because my face was like shaking. I was like, it took me until I was 39 to find you, and I am not going to bury you because of a shot that the TV is saying you need when you don't really need it.
Right.
And I just said, I think this will be proven to be something that was unnecessary at best. And it was like he just finally heard me. And so for those shots to be removed from the childhood schedule yesterday
Yeah.
is a moment where it's like I still feel susceptible to overthinking and fear of what others think of me because I've gone through a lot. And it's like, it's just kind of nice to see a headline like that because it says back to me, like, you weren't crazy.
Right.
It's not acceptable into innocent human bodies. And I'm very proud of having protected my kids. And I think if they don't, they will someday understand it was love.
Right.
Because what they went through was really tough for them.
I
But
can.
it's a moment. And so that sacred no moment of like standing on that hill turned into the book. It was
Yeah.
like, and I'm one of those people where it's like, find something to do. Like
Right.
I had so much energy. I was in such a troubling spot in my heart. And writing was like, it was like I collected it all. It was like, oh, underneath all of that delusional
Right.
capture was a conservative compass, a willingness to trust God, and all of these custom built experiences kind of created a way for
Yeah.
me to articulate all of it within not just the context of masculine and feminine energy and relationships, but within the greater culture. Because I mean, in the greater culture today, I have women who comment on my TikTok and treat me as though I am doing something wrong because I am encouraging them to find love, lasting happiness and
Right.
love. And that to me is like, what is going on?
Right.
So,
It- it's whether it's finding love or sharing knowledge or whatever else. It just does seem like whether the people are real or they're bots or whatever, they just feel very triggered by it, which is very interesting to me. Speaking of triggered, was there any trigger from yesterday if this was taken off the schedule? Was there any pomp and circumstance? Did any mainstream media like run a 30-second clip saying it's taken off and here's why? Or was it just like a page 10 of some news article? How I didn't even hear about
I
it.
have no idea. I get Children's Health Defense emails.
Mm,
So that's how I found out.
okay.
I don't pay attention to mainstream media. I mean, I do
Don't
know,
either.
I pay enough attention to know that if it was reported, it was probably delivered as a tragedy that we all have to guard ourselves against or
Right.
something, as like, or something that's just immoral and, oh, that anti-vaxxer or whatever they want to say about RFK Jr. But I'm going to just be very bold and say, if you are still willing to have an emotional reaction from the base of the brain and cause a judgment of a person who has tirelessly attempted to serve children and families and our country, if you're still willing to emotionally react to someone like that instead of just looking at the data,
Right.
then that's not freedom.
Right.
And that is something that was done on purpose by design.
Right.
There is, I say it all the time and write about it all the time. Denial is the single most important form of protection for sociopathic systems, sociopaths, and any force in the universe that is attempting harm.
Yeah.
Denial. So denial would cause someone to say, "Oh, RFK Jr. is just totally an anti-vaxxer. I can't even listen to it." And many women, many mothers are going to do that today, and they're
Right.
going to do that about it being removed from the schedule. And inside of that denial and that emotional response that the dark side or the dark system wants that mother to have, inside of that is she may have chosen to get that shot for her kid, so he could go back to intramural sports or whatever, which I completely understand, and the pressure worked. And I
Right.
have a lot of compassion for the pain of that, of being unwilling to like look at what's in something after the fact that you introduced it to your kid. I think we
Mm-hmm.
all have to hold a massive amount of compassion for mothers who did that. And, but it is important because it, over time, things may be revealed. I mean, things have already happened to children, horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
They're actually happening to children, not even the COVID vaccine, regular
Well,
vaccines.
I, I don't know if I don't know if I told you the last time we talked, but here I'll add this in. Um, I have voted for Republican and Democratic presidents. So I've said this a couple times in episodes. So people can tell maybe where I lean or where I don't. I don't know. I voted for three presidents in my lifetime. All three of them won. Some are on the Democrat side, some are on the Republican side. You can probably guess which ones, just kind of gauging my age. But I'll go a step further than that. I made the decision. I had free will and choice and agency. I did get the COVID vaccine, and I got one booster, and I stopped in 2021. It took me a little more time to awaken, but the situation I cannot excuse. Like, there were people in my life and situations in my life that I listened, but I'm standing up to say I made a free will and choice. Now there's some things that I did after that from a medicine standpoint. I'll leave it at that. That I've kind of helped myself feel better, but I won't. I'm not here to talk about that. But I'm just saying I like people to sometimes hear my background as opposed to someone being like, oh, well, he's that guy and he's always been that guy and I'm like, no, I haven't.
No, I'm like shocked. The reason I'm shocked is because of our correspondence.
Right,
So like no one, well, I shouldn't say no one because you're
right.
an example, but most of the time I've come to assume, which,
Right.
never assume, it makes an ass out of you and me. But
And it's okay if you never talk to me again. I mean, it's okay.
no,
But,
are you
but
are
it's
you kidding? No, that's the thing. I'm so glad you shared this because there is no judgment. There is no judgment from me. It's not my place to judge. And the only reason I'm surprised is I feel so heard by you based on our last podcast and
and
correspondence in between. And
right.
I typically, I realized that I assumed because it's like, oh, he went through the same thing as me, because so many of us
Well,
who went through it
yeah,
understand, because it's impossible to understand
right.
what happened to people unless you stood against it. Like, I get how many people are like, what, why wouldn't you have just gone and gotten it? Or like, why did you put yourself through that? Like, I totally understand that. And so
I went
because
through
you
it.
didn't have that stance, I just figured
Well,
you also stood.
I went through it a little differently. So I ended up in the same place, but I just went through a different filter. Like my wife, I think she felt a pressure from an employment standpoint. I had already, I'd already taken the shot because of sort of some personal, I'll say pressures. I'll leave it at that. I made the choice, so can't half explain. My job would have pressured me into it, but they kind of got to the point and they didn't. So I'd already trained, already left the station for me. And then I did one booster. And then to say I woke up is cliche, but like, then I was like, never again. I'm not doing this. I started sort of my eyes opening, whatever. So the pressures that I said no to after the fact were a little bit easier because I'd already I'd already gotten it. I took the Moderna. I didn't look up whether the batch was good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just like, I'm going to work on there's some things I took, which are, not pharmaceutical grade. I'm not a doctor. So just know that. But I did some things for me. I did a lot of praying. Um, so some of the pressures you talk about, it's not as if I didn't see that because I didn't want to wear masks afterwards or anything else. And I'll fast forward to now. Um, Unless something is absolutely required for my children to go to school, which I still am not very happy about, like flu shots and things like that. encourage their mother, who of course, that we're from a blended family, so she has her own decisions. I don't even like them doing that unless it absolutely needs to happen. And even then I would probably argue, is it really absolutely? But that's kind of the level that I'm at. So yeah, I guess I hadn't shared that before. I forget that that's like part of my story, but I like to say it in the same vein as, yes, I've taken COVID shots. I don't agree that I did it, but I made the choice, and now I will never do it again for beyond just COVID. And I voted for different presidents, which sometimes takes the air out of things, to think that it sometimes takes the air out of arguments to be like, oh, you're just a staunch Republican and you never won any vaccines. And well, of course you're going to feel that way. And I'm like, no, no, that's not always how I was. I was, anyway, go ahead.
Well, I agree, because it so provides for that denial that protects systems which need the protection of, they require nobody looking into anything,
Right.
nobody thinking for themselves, nobody knowing what they think and believe. So that denial shield requires just pigeonholes. Oh, she's this. Oh, he's that.
Right.
Oh, he voted. It's like I can feel when I'm in the presence of someone who's like pigeonholing me, and
Right.
that's fine. It's like, I know what that is. I don't actually consider it an exchange between us. I just consider it an acknowledgement of a veil that may or may not lift, because I put an Obama 2008 sticker on my car in 2004.
Right.
I was like all in, and I have nothing good to say about that person today.
Right.
And that is because I have looked into to a great deal of specifics on his relationships, and I've looked into financials, and therefore I dismiss him as who I thought he was. I bought into an illusion, and I bought into a hoodwink.
Yes.
It is literally getting hoodwinked. It was theatrical in nature, and it still is.
I agree.
And so if you can watch the play, and then you can go home and you can find out who financed it. You can find out who produced it. You can find out that there's a name in the production team, that there's an unnamed producer,
right,
and an unnamed contribution. You can find all that stuff out. And like, you have to pick, where do you want to live? Do you want to live in a seat in the audience just watching a play when it has to do with your children, your future, your finances? Or do you want to go home and take the playbill and read the fine print and start looking into who produced the play? Look into who produced the play, people. You will get all of the answers. And this is the thing, as it has to do with the shots. It wasn't even about, for me, it wasn't even about anything except for the data and the facts. And even if it comes down to being a pro-life person, which I am, and knowing that there were fetal cells, there was material from aborted fetuses in the COVID vaccine.
Right.
So that alone. So do I want to introduce something into my system as consent and acceptance of the way that child passed? No, I don't.
Right.
And I understand that all of this terminology has hoodwinked people into saying it wasn't a baby, or it's like, it's life. Right. In my estimation, it's life. And so I get to know what I think, I get to know what I believe, and I get to preserve that within myself without being in a place of judgment of anyone else.
Yeah.
And so when people start to do this digging, they realize that they have choices, that they have an identity of their own, and they don't have to judge anybody else. It doesn't even come with that, because I think that's part of the reason why people aren't looking into things. It's like, how will I accept my loved ones? How will I continue to function? Well, you will find your way. You will realize like where you end and where someone else begins. And I'm so glad that you just shared that information, because I have a lot of people in my life who chose to get it, and I love them and I respect their choice. I mean, my husband and I were constantly saying, we're actually the people who were validating everyone's right to freely choose.
Right.
it wasn't, so because it was
Right, because you're the
assumed
only
that
one making the choices. The rest of them are like, there is no choice. This is the only thing, and you're like, no, no, it's
no. And yeah. And it was like, it was assumed that I was going to say that someone else was wrong for getting it. No,
right.
you have every right to do what you want with your body.
I
I
think
just wanted that too.
I think that was part of it for me. So I tend to be, so to say you're registered independent. Some people think that doesn't matter or whatever. You're just you're a cloaked Republican, whatever. That's fine. I voted for Obama in 2008. Okay, so just so everyone hears it, I voted for Obama in '08. The next round, I was like, yeah, this is not really what I understood, and I didn't. I have come to learn many other things that I think are very possible, kind of like you've mentioned, but I'll leave it at that. I did not vote in the 2016 election. I sort of was very apathetic to politics. And in the 2021 realm, I just wanted everyone to get along. One person felt like they weren't a unifier. This other older man felt like he was a unifier. So I'm just going to vote for Biden because he wants everyone to just sort of get along. Even though some of the stuff I heard during Trump's initial parts into 2021, I'm just laying it all out there, Amy, so you have it. I was like, he makes more sense than I thought he did. Like I really didn't realize. So I'm like, And then fast forward now to November 4th of 2024, I volunteered to help at 4 a.m. with Trump's rally in Raleigh and then got to sit 12 rows behind him. I didn't meet him or anything. But so if you hear that, you're like, okay, well, this guy voted for these people and he voted for this guy and he took the vaccine. Like, I don't think I'm all over the map. I think I have made the concerted choices and learned from them over time. I'm not saying that Trump is the best person in the world. I'm just saying that's currently where I'm at because of caring about, I think, people and health. I'm just sharing that to say it's not that I've always been one way or another. I've allowed myself to change my mind and make mistakes. So
I think that is so important to share, and you're such a signal in the noise because what you're talking about is choosing to discover what you think and what you believe and what you know, and
right.
choosing to test it in various contexts. And that alone is a solution. And I got to this point because it was early in 2020 that I, woke up, which by the way, the whole Great Awakening and all of that. I mean, there's a lot of people who need to wake up from the Great Awakening. So
Right.
I'm not endorsing any group.
I hear you.
I just think for myself. But that awakening moment that I had was wearing a mask outside in April of 2020 in Los Angeles, California, and walking with my phone to a homeless encampment, listening to the Daily, which I can't believe I listened to, like at the New York Times, NPR kind of thing. Anyway, and I'm ready to call 911 because they have no sinks and they have no showers, and it's a homeless encampment. And I'm thinking I'm going to see somebody and I'm going to have to call an ambulance. It had tripled in size.
Wow.
And I just stood there, fully believing. And by the way, I had gone through an autoimmune intestinal infection in December of 2019.
Okay.
So I was getting these super cozy emails from UCLA. You have to take extra care. Your immune system, blah, blah, blah. It was like, what? I'm going to get this like VIP treatment for having been sick. I mean,
right.
That was a component of the hoodwink.
Right.
I was a stepmom in a thankless job. And all of a sudden I'm going to get this like treatment, and that's what the medical cartel does. It hisses at innocent people who are getting their needs met for deep and real emotional needs that they have a right to have, but they're getting them met in a way that is, it's solution and harm. It's like a mix of solution and harm. So I was in that.
Well,
I was all
there's
in
always there's always a grain of truth in anything, whether you want to look at medical industry, religion. We don't have to go down that path too much, but there's always a good light in anything. But if you're not asking yourself questions or paying attention to being open about things, you can fall prey to anything. And some are very very seductive. Like sounds like this one is too. Yes,
for
Amy,
sure.
You should think about your immunity.
Well, all of that stuff in 2020 was seductive.
Right.
That's what it was. If the pressure wasn't working, it was like, this sort of sliding in, like, well, you want to go back to, I mean, don't you want to go back to the gym? Wink, wink.
Right.
I mean, it was all just manipulation and seduction.
Right.
And so, but that moment for me was so and by the way, I want to validate that point of like, there's a grain of truth, there's grains of truth in this stuff. Absolutely. And then a physical representation of that is that there are good people working hard in all of the systems
Right.
that are contaminated.
Right.
And so that's another thing, is that when you start to look at things case by case with just calm, rational thought, because the health freedom movement is full of judgment and rejection, and they become the very thing that they're fighting against. And I reject that totally. I was a part of that for a little while, and I was like, this is not me. Because the point is, we have to look case by case. And there are many doctors who do believe what they're doing, and they're good people, and even people who are giving unnecessary vaccines to children. I mean, that's getting harder and harder for me to believe, because I know the kickback. I know how much of their income, like practically half, comes from vaccines. So, I mean, that's getting harder to believe. But I will say there are good people in malevolent systems.
Right.
And that has to be acknowledged. So anyway, going back to that moment in April of 2020 when I had that light bulb, I think that what happened is that there was like, it led me into this thirst for answers. And I had no idea what was coming.
What did you expect to find at that homeless encampment? Because you've said this a couple
Dead
times.
people.
Okay.
Dead people. I mean, deadly virus. I'm hearing in all the propaganda that I was taking in, which it was propaganda. And if you look at the Smith-Mundt Act and what Obama did in that update, it was legal propaganda that was legally being used against its own citizens, American propaganda.
So you expected to go to that homeless encampment, and there would just be death and destruction. No one there, that would be, you would need to be calling 911 to get some help. And instead of that, there was just 3 times the size of it. And I'm not going to say thriving. I'm not talking about a homeless encampment thriving, but there was a lot more people there, and relatively speaking, healthy is what you saw.
Fine. Doing drugs. I mean, when you live in Los Angeles in the years that I lived there, I mean, homeless encampments were like festivals, like music festivals.
Right.
And at that point, it was like, come here, we're giving you a phone, we're giving you what?
The LA version of Burning Man or something.
Totally. It was literally a sort of a degraded version of that kind of thing. And I've never been to Burning Man, but I've seen pictures. So it was like that kind of energy and vibration. But very depraved, very much worse. I mean, my kids saw people doing drugs. We drove by seeing that. I saw it. I thought I would see at least one casualty or illness or like a dead body. I mean, that was what I was being told.
Right.
And that's the thing about the shield that is the internet, is like, I could have lived that close to an encampment and just never gone out, because the internet was telling me, don't go out. It's so dangerous. But I was just sort of a little bit curious, and I was walking for exercise, and it was like, oh, I'm going to go over there and see, it was larger. It was a party. And so the whole time I'm walking home, I'm going, it was like in real time, this thing of like, what is going on?
Right.
And so I start taking my mask down, doing like we were just talking about, remember the chin thing?
Yeah, you just held it right here.
I was like knitting in a council meeting once, like refused to even put one on, and everyone in the room. I mean, Culver City is still a living museum to March of 2020. And that's where I was living at the time. So I've never felt so many daggers at me at once. And my husband's with me, and I'm like, take that thing off, take it off. Because he had like the chin, But anyway, so I'm pulling it down like that. And I'm noticing how I feel as I pass people. It's like people are looking at me like, why don't you have that thing on? I mean, at that time, everyone was wearing them outside.
Right.
I mean, my kids wear them outside.
Right.
My kids went with their mom to go pick up a dog. I was like, where's the dog? Who could be in the house? I mean, I was so in it. That's
Right.
what I really want to convey, is that I may have gone that route and somehow God made me to sort of like open up my mind to seeing the motivation that was occupying people. So anyway, I went home and I said, I wonder what Dr. Christian Northrup is saying about this stuff, because she wrote Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom, and
Yeah.
I had read all of her books, and she was a go-to for me because she seemed to be a blend of common sense and hearty simplicity, and then the willingness to look at the metaphysical.
Yeah.
And she, by the way, wrote the foreword of my book, which I'm
Oh,
very
nice.
grateful for. And it's a great foreword
Yeah.
for single women to read. It's kind of like a big splash of cold water, which her books are like that.
Right.
And so I went and I looked at her Instagram, and she was doing kind of a 40-day thing or a 21-day thing of like something spiritual. But she was just saying it. I mean, I don't even know who else was saying it that boldly at the time, where she was
Right.
like, I was ready for this. I saw this coming. I've been standing against vaccines long before the COVID shot. And I was like, oh my, and I'm looking, I'm holding my phone. Like, it's like, is anyone around me? And then in the comments, people are meeting each other. Like I hooked up with someone, a friend from years before, and she was like, "Did I?" Oh, well, I mean, it's a long story, but she shared one of my songs one night,
Right.
and a couple days later, a friend from the past was like, "Did she just share your song?" And I was like, "Hey," her name happened to be Amy. Also, she has sadly since passed away. Fearlessly dealt with a medical issue in her own way. Anyway, so we reconnected, and a lot of people reconnected in Chris's comments, Dr. Chris's comments. And so it was like one thing just led to the next. And I have to say, for a long time, I still had a willingness, like you did, to just participate. Like, could this be super
Right.
necessary? I was listening to loved ones. And then there came a threshold where it just wasn't anymore,
Right.
because I took an actual class where I was listening to people who were showing us labs. They were showing us
Yeah.
a lot of data. But so it was just this passage, and it's still going on, to tell you the
Yeah.
truth.
No,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I could paint a broad brush to say in general, now that you know what my, political things have been and vaccines. I think the easiest way to generalize it for me is that when there are policies or conduct that go specifically after children, and I'm going to just say, if you're 18 and below, like, I have a very protective nature. It's not that when you're over 18 that I don't, but I'm respecting your autonomy as an adult. Like, if you want to go out and get a tattoo at 18, like, if that's what you want to do, go ahead. I have a tattoo, so I'm not. That's just a judgment to say, once you're 18, if you want to remove perfectly good body parts off you, you can, because you're an adult. I really wish that you wouldn't. I really wish that you wouldn't do that. But if that's it, I feel the same way about vaccines, and I feel the same way about policies in general for politics. I don't understand the juxtaposition of it, but that's what woke me up in general about children. And it's not just because I have 2 biological and 3 stepchildren. Like, I think I'd have felt that anyway. A child, just kind of like Oliver says. Like, Oliver's your husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
He says, just give it time. Like, if you feel something at 12, can you give it, do whatever you'd like, wear whatever you'd like, I guess, listen to the music you like. But before you do something permanent, like a vaccine, which I think is permanent, more more involved things, wait till you're 18. And then when you get to 18, like, maybe wait for a couple more years till you're just thinking about it. If you really want to do it, that's fine. I don't know if I shared this story before, but I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'll finish with this and I'll turn it back to you. I was talking with my kids one day, and I was like, this is a couple years ago. They were probably like, 8, 9, 10. I said, you can look this up if you don't believe your father, but your brain really isn't fully developed till like age 27 or 28. And my daughter was like, I guess I probably shouldn't make really big decisions till then. Right. And I'm like, actually, Ella, that's a great idea. I mean, I'm glad you thought of that, because but that's the type of thing to just be like, look, just give it time. Like, you can do things, you can dress how you want, do stuff. And, someone might listen to me and be like, well, that's very bigoted, or whatever other label they want to give. But, you know, vaccines and everything else going after children is really, it's really beyond just unfortunate. It doesn't feel like it's free choices. It feels like it's just what you're supposed to do, and we're just supposed to listen to what's told. Anyway,
Well, I have a friend who was escorted out of her pediatrician's office in Los Angeles
yeah,
as if she was a perpetrator of some kind and belonged in a penitentiary. That was what happened to her when she declined the DTaP and the MMR and all that.
right,
She was escorted out
right.
dramatically. And so I don't call that service for children. I call
No,
that
it's not.
force and coercion. And if you want to know the opposite of love, if you want to dig down like I did and learn the like actual opposites, the opposite of love is coercion.
Right.
It's not hate.
Right.
Because love is freedom. Love is allowing. Love is letting go.
Right.
And the opposite of all of that is coercion. And that's what that is. And I say this about California a lot because a lot of people don't even know what's going on in California. And the goal is that California become the whole United States. And everybody needs to realize that. Look into Chris Bray. Chris Bray writes on Substack, and he is writing to warn people that what is happening, it will not ever happen. But the attempt is for what is happening in California to happen all over the United States. Right. And that means, and it's happening starting in Colorado now. And it's like the state owning your children.
Right.
Surrendering your children to the state. And the vaccine schedule is a part of that. The trans agenda is connected to that. If you look into childhood vaccines and you understand what is in them, right, and that there is a hormonal and steroidal component to it, it kind of makes sense that little kids are starting to wonder beyond just their energetic nature, whether or not they're the opposite gender.
Right.
Many things that are just, well, it just never happened before. Well, it's just here now because it's the future. And, these are new things. It's new.
Right.
That's by design. It's not new. We are humans, human beings. Like we're the similar and same structure as our ancestors who lived hundreds of years ago. Right. We do not need to illogically accept that suddenly it's new and so therefore it's valid. Right. It's new to the system that has introduced it to us and explained it to us. And that's it. And that's what they said about COVID. I remember one of the people that I could no longer communicate with about it was like, this is new. This is the thing. It's never been seen before. That got a lot of mileage. But if you look into the HIV/AIDS crisis, you look into every dollar that Fauci touched, there is nothing new about what they introduced in 2019.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really scary because it's like, it's stealing human fulfillment. Right. It's stealing steadfast, abiding, deep.
Well, let's talk a little silver linings about that, though, because if it's been taken off the schedule as of yesterday, and I hear what you're saying as far as California and those kind of things, and that I agree too. It will never happen, but there's an intent for it. But if it is being taken off the schedule from yesterday, that looks like it's a positive thing. Do you wonder why it's taken off, or do you have more skepticism about it? Do you think?
Well, it is a positive thing. And by the way, I don't know what it is exactly. I might be that's no longer recommended. I don't know what the statement from the CDC is. And I don't really care because I don't need or use the CDC.
Right.
But I think for it to be a public declaration, it does matter. But I think that these are just, they're tiny little steps in a situation that could be, ideally, there are very large, very, very deliberate actions could be taken.
Right.
Why do some people stay on YouTube when they talk about COVID vaccines being toxic? And why do some people get taken off?
Right.
Why is it okay for Tucker Carlson to slowly discover things live in front of everyone
Right.
and not get taken down? Or Joe Rogan to slowly discover things, Oh, Joe Rogan said it.
Right.
Why do we have these trademarked people saying the same exact thing while other people get taken down for
Right.
it, which is censorship, which
Yeah.
many people don't even know who's getting. I got taken down for podcasts that I was just exploring the concepts.
Right.
And so why is Badlands Media constantly censored?
Right.
Why, when Chris Paul of Badlands Media has been talking about what Joe Rogan is exposing for millions of dollars, why is Chris Paul still throttled and unknown and hidden? He is one of the most brilliant minds we have. And I'm not talking about in this side, I won't even say in like the truther movement, because
Right.
he's not even, he doesn't want to be anything but a signal in the noise and permission to get, the permission slip to think for yourself.
Right.
That's all he's ever doing. And he's a brilliant writer and he podcasts every day. And there's an energy to it that's like a 70s like radio, just like
I've
he's
never
just
heard of him.
free.
I'll have to look him up.
Oh,
Never
Chris
heard of him.
Paul is brilliant.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's an indication that there could be major deliberate moves to actually analyze like what or who is being served here.
Right.
And that could stop, but it won't. And we don't know why. It's like, we don't really know. We have to look at policy, and we have to look at what is taking place, and we have to look at money itself. We have to remove our focus from personalities and, parties and all that stuff. There is one party. Yeah. It's a uniparty. Right. And they're working together to implement globalism. And globalism is Marxism and communism, and it kills people.
Right.
Like, it's that simple.
Yeah.
And so we can look at the deliberate moves that support and continue to support globalism and Marxism. And, or we can, keep buying in and being like, oh, now, like, it's okay to think this now because Joe Rogan said so.
Right.
It's okay. It's okay to like Mark Zuckerberg because he entered the confessional of Joe Rogan's podcast. Right. And he's absolved of all sin now. It's like, people made fun of me in the same way that I was ridiculed in third grade. I was bullied in third grade, and I experienced an exact replica of those experiences because I stood up for kids who were still wearing masks in Culver City at school. Right. When people on TV were kissing the night before at the Grammys, right. Kissing in front of the camera, and the kids are in masks. Right. So I stand up and I have another parent bullying me for it. Why? Because Mark Zuckerberg knew that Facebook was an absolute silo or echo chamber, right, of encouraged hate of anyone who stood against the vaccine. Don Lemon, or Lemon, however you say his name, encouraged people to reject and despise their loved ones. This right. was taught and sold to people through the media. And now all of a sudden it's okay. Oh, he went on Joe Rogan, so everything's okay now. Like, right. It's a continued hoodwink. Yeah. It's all a hoodwink. So it's like, this is about going back into the self. Like, what do I believe? And that's why so many people reconnect with God or rejuvenate their relationship with God or find God.
I can tell you I have very, very much. I have a very, we haven't talked about it too much and we don't need to, but it's I have a very inward spiritual type view. I grew up religious. My wife's more religious than I am, but I have a very spiritual type view to it. I even have a friend of mine who is big into the LDS community. He was a bishop for a period of time and still works with young children. He and I have spiritual and religious debates back and forth. And you know what? We get along just fine. And I can say, well, here's what I think. Is that blasphemous? He's like, maybe for some people, but not so much for me. And he's part of Polynesian culture. So we can even stir around those type of pots that most of the time people aren't allowed to talk about. I think it's really funny. It's not really funny, Amy, but I feel like someone did a disservice to us all when we said there's two things you can't talk about at the dinner table. You can't talk about politics and you can't talk about religion. Well, no wonder people don't know each other and that they need to label them of this or that. Like I I got off on track from what you were mentioning, but going inward and thinking what you want for yourself, and then also outward from the standpoint of each of us, I think, are a piece of God. We are an embodiment of God. So can we look at each other in that way? I think some of us can, some of us can't. Some of us think we have to look through with different glasses. Um, I I do see a fair amount of hope day to day for me, but it's not so much on online anymore. It's less and less there. Um, I don't know if you see some. I know you get your fan letters on TikTok and else. But do you see some good silver linings as well? Do
I
you feel like
do. I mean, I do. It's like every day is different. I think the communities are going to be smaller and smaller
yeah,
online. I think that,
I
I
think
mean,
so too. Yeah.
I asked a couple of young teenagers recently what their life is like with if they're dealing with negativity online, and they're like, no. And they told me all about these limitations in place where they just don't see certain stuff. And I thought, this is great that things are emerging, patterns are emerging for like a digital protection,
Right.
whether it's parental controls or whatever. And so, in terms of kids, I realize I'm naive when I think about what they may be dealing with. My own experience, I just think it's going to get smaller and stay smaller for it to be better. I think a lot of huge and growing accounts, I'm still very suspicious. Anyone who
I'm
doesn't
too.
get censored, anyone who profited during the pandemic, any
Right.
of that is just, I'm just very suspicious. Like I never listened to either of the Means siblings. Nothing they say means anything to me because they are in the same category as Fauci. They profited during the pandemic.
Right.
I do not have wonderful feelings about an appointment. And I don't even know if she was actually appointed or not. I know there was talk of appointing the female sibling. I don't care.
Hmm.
I don't need an attorney general,
Right.
a surgeon general. I just don't need that. I am not looking toward any of the things that are being recommended. I'm not looking at them.
I'm not either. I'm not even sure I'm
And
ready
that's the
for what.
thing. So like communities will shrink, and
Right.
there will be people who, and I seek medical attention. I'm very careful and conscious of the medical attention I seek. I just had a tooth pulled. I had an
Right.
implant put in. I have a
Yeah, I do want
holistic.
to. I want to talk about that. You mentioned. Tell me about that experience and kind of how you got led up to this. And I frame this to say, I have heard, I haven't validated it or like decided how I feel, but like something as a not as innocent it seems like as wisdom teeth. If they're really painful for you, maybe you should take them out. I know my wisdom teeth were taken out in high school and they didn't hurt. I only had three, but I was told they needed to come out, so they came out. And then I read some things, and it's not as if I believe every single thing, but some of it when it makes sense. Like if something doesn't hurt, why pull it out? And yeah, they're at a certain angle, but they'll just straighten out eventually. And like if they don't hurt, why take them out? Is this along the same realm as what you're talking about here for the root canal, or is it a little different?
I've never weighed in on with my holistic dentist on wisdom teeth, but I'm sure he would have a lot to say.
Yeah,
He's brilliant, by the way,
yeah,
and anyone who wants his information, I'll email. I don't like to tell specifics on my location, but I will give specifics on my holistic dentist, who I very much recommend. So email Adam, and then he can put you
yeah.
in touch with me. But I think a lot of those things happen because it's like, this is just what we do. I'm just this age. Well, this is just what they do, or they. It's like, well, who's they and why?
Right.
The reason I had this work done is because I had an infection in my gums, and it was pretty serious. It was probably going on for a long time. My holistic dentist was like, wow, you have an amazing immune system because this has been going on a while.
Yeah.
It got to the point where there was like, it was really gross. It was like something was there.
Hmm.
So but I had just moved to the area. So I was looking for a dentist, and I was waffling between like ordinary dentistry and holistic,
Yeah.
even though Dr. Christian Northrup's father was a holistic dentist. So I was somewhat aware. And I saw a documentary called Root Cause. I just stumbled upon it. Root Cause, which by the way, it's been taken off of Netflix. Gee,
Oh,
I wonder why.
yeah.
And it's all about how root canals lead to illness, because what you're doing is keeping a dead organ like in the body, which then leaches.
Right.
It's just dead. It's not living tissue. And so it was all about how pulling a tooth and putting an implant in can save you long over time from having problems and serious problems. There are women in the documentary who believe that their cancer or their back problems were related to their root canals. And when you look up the meridians of the body, just like in reflexology, the feet are a reflection of the meridians of the whole body and the organs of the body.
Right.
Also, the teeth reflect organs of the body, which, by the way, I think is how I lasted with an infection, because I did have pain,
Yeah.
and then I would notice the related organ, and I would eat to sort of eat nourishing foods for that organ. I think that's what caused me to deal with my body to deal with the infection.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I went to, it's pretty involved to have a tooth out. It's not fun.
Right.
And it is surgery. I had another surgery to get the implant, and then a few months down the road, I'll get the crown. And it's not cheap, and they don't always take insurance, but that's the way it is with a lot of actual care, holistic care,
Right.
unfortunately. And so, but I think that it is a choice that that can just serve you over time, and help you to see your body and yourself as a whole person, and not just parts that need to go in for some kind of silo treatment. It's like we are a whole being. And what was really interesting, I think I meant to say this earlier, when I went in to meet the doctor and his staff, and they're all amazing. They could not believe me when I was telling them about California. So these are all people who declined the COVID vaccine, and probably vaccines in general, and
Right.
understand holistic health. I mean, the first day that I saw my holistic dentist, he said that his daughter had the sniffles and, tightness in her chest, bronchial stuff. So he put her to bed with coconut oil and fresh garlic, and
Yeah.
on the bottoms of her feet, and put her in socks. And she's just used to that.
Right.
It's like pull the toxins out through the bottom of the feet, and she'll
Right.
wake up feeling better.
Right.
And there are people who just they literally they place a moral equivalent on an action like that, because they are so hoodwinked into thinking that modern medical cartel suggestions are moral. They're the moral high ground. And so it's like socks. And I mean, haven't we evolved beyond that? It's like, well, no, last time I checked, we're all still human with
Right.
feet, you know?
Right.
So, anyway, those are the conversations that were emerging, and they couldn't believe me. Like, I felt like I was lying when I was telling them about why I stopped going to the dentist, because I didn't want to sit in the waiting room with a mask on
Right.
and have somebody do the temperature thing, like going on into 2023.
Right.
They were like, what? So that was another thing I was going to say earlier about California. Many people live on the internet, no matter where they are, there's this like hoodwinked brand that's being delivered through the internet to all of us.
Right.
And so the solution, and I think Chris Paul talks about this too, lots of people do, the solution is to get into your community, talk to people, and find out what is really happening in your community and in the lives of other people.
Yeah.
Like when I moved here, I think to an extent I anticipated thinking that people were still wrapped up in all of the trans insanity.
Right.
But it's like, it's only on the internet.
Right.
I don't meet anyone who wants their female child to compete against a biological male in her freshman year in high school.
I can tell you too that I've been filled with a lot of inspiration and conversations with my kids. I mean, they're between the ages of 11 and 17, so they're like right in the thick of it. There was a little bit with one daughter in middle school, not quite to that level. It was more like, I dare say, like normal stuff, like, do I like girls? Do I like guys? I'm like, well, do you want to kiss a girl? And she's like, no. I said, then that means that you're not. You just like being with them. And that wasn't me trying to like scare her straight or scare her gay. I was just like, walk me through this. Like, do you like being around girls? Yeah. I'm like, girls are sometimes nicer than guys. I'm like, do you want to kiss her? No, not really. I'm like, then it's fine. Like but but it took. I remember I was sitting on my front porch, like having that conversation, trying to like keep my dad stuff internal to be like, don't just like fly off the handle and be like, you're not doing, because there wasn't any judgment if she wanted to be gay or not. I could tell how confused she was because she's hearing, well, this is what you are. This is what people are supposed to be. And that's many years ago. I don't eat, whether that or trans or anything. I don't hear it as much. The kids seem to be making their own choices. Um,
They do.
some are very much some are very much like there's only two genders and that's it. Others are like, I don't know, maybe they're a little more open, which is fine either way that they want to be, but they all seem to be thinking. They don't seem to be like saying, oh, well, I was told this and this is just what it is.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of people who say like kids know who they are, and I agree. I became a stepmom too when the boys were little, and I agree. Kids know who they are, and they come in knowing who they are.
Right.
And to subtract constant pressure and constant information that is very involved and takes a mature brain to process.
Right.
Expecting kids to know who they are through that without a ton of guidance or without unbiased guidance, that's insanity. That is total insanity. And Jennifer Bilek is the source on proving what is actually going on with the trans agenda, what the end game is, and what every single dollar involved will show people.
Right.
And I happen to know someone who, like, I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't talked to her in so long. And my husband was like, yeah, I think there's a reason for that. And we found out that one of their kids is transitioning, and it's like, I don't know if I'll ever talk to her again, but it's like, I want young women who are transitioning into becoming a man to understand things that I have heard from detransitioners myself. Right. With my own ears. For instance, a woman who had a double mastectomy. It was a botched job because it was a rushed job. She was talked into it. She restored her connection with her feminine, her biological gender, and her feminine energy. She met someone, she got pregnant, and her milk came in after she delivered her baby because they had done such a botched double mastectomy. And so I have not ever breastfed a child, but I know a lot of women who have, and I've seen the pain of a woman who needs to run to a public restroom to just squeeze breast milk into the sink just to stop feeling pain. She couldn't do that.
Right.
She said the pain of her milk coming in was worse than childbirth.
Wow.
Is a woman who's considering a double mastectomy because she thinks she's a boy, because she has a right to express her masculine energy, to express her masculine power. She has a right to have a same-sex partner if she wants. She has a right to do all kinds of things that arrive from, that arrive and cause changing your gender to seem like a solution.
Right.
It's like, you can do all the things that you want to do in your life. Like, it is a wonderful and incredible free country. But you don't have to do this final thing of a hormonal, steroidal, medical transition that involves surgery. Right. I mean, there are so many people suffering, detransitioners, physically suffering. They've been physically suffering since they started medical transition, and nobody knows it. Right. And the numbers are constantly botched, and the continued narrative is they'll kill themselves if they don't, and detransitioners are a tiny percentage. They're not. There's a huge percentage of detransitioners, and they're censored just like, same system of censorship. Well, boy, I really am going all in. I'm like, I've covered the gamut, and I'll say this really quick.
Yeah.
It's like, hi, I'm a dating coach. I wrote a book and I want to help you get married. And I know I'm this like confusing, and I tried. I was like, Amy, can you just keep teaching women? And I do, and I will. But it's like, I think I want everyone to know, and you seem to be the perfect podcast to say this on, that like,
Yeah.
it's hard won. And I feel the pain of what is going on. I feel the pain of the hoodwink. That's what I was in myself.
Well,
That's
right.
what caused me to go through my path. And so a hoodwink is a hoodwink is a hoodwink.
That's right.
I was hoodwinked into being, a loner and a star. And what I did was just lose my opportunity to be a birth mother and a
Right.
wife young, which was what I was dreaming of. So, I mean, it was a second chance, and I'm grateful for how it turned out. But it was just a hoodwink that caused me to
Right.
make decisions that were completely anti-life, anti-family. And so what is different from like whether it's the trans or the vaccine agenda or blah, 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 on and on. And so it's really like, to me, it's all the same thing because the truth is simple and lies are what is complicated.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, maybe you already heard me say it, but I tend to think most everything is connected, and I say most everything to give a little bit. I think everything's connected. Like, and if you look through your own experiences, I think it's good that you go all in to share all of your experiences because people are going to be helped the most, I think, by us being ourselves. I don't mean not being respectful or anything, but just being ourselves and be like, here's the news that I can report of what's happened to me. Take it for what it's worth. Make your own choices. So
Yes.
I'm thrilled that you made time to talk through all the different gamuts that you want to. Send us home, Amy. How do you want to send us home with this? What do you think?
Um, it just occurred to me while you were saying that. I just really want to encourage women especially women, but men too, to engage in their communities, know their neighbors, know the people in your life, reconnect with your loved ones. If you were told to disregard a loved one because she got or didn't get, a shot or whatever it is, like, it's time to mend fences and it's time to be in our communities. Like, I am in a church. I love my church. I disagree with a ton of components of my religion and my diocese and my church. I agree. It's so involved, but guess what? I get to go. I
Right.
get to go. I get to create spiritual structure around my belief in God and my commitment to God.
Yeah.
And I get to pray about the overlapping concerns I have and the hypocrisy. And I get to pray about all of it. I get to bring it to God and I get to prioritize relationship with God above rules and religion. And I get to go. I get to go and sing and offer my voice to God. I sing in church because I was granted a gift by God. So I just give
Right.
back and say thank you for my gift.
Beautiful.
And I mean, if I can do that, girls, I'm telling you, ladies, gentlemen, if you told me 15 years ago that I would be like getting up on Sunday, like I want to go, I would have been like, are you kidding me?
Right.
But and that may not be your way. It may not be your listener's way, but there is something that you can do to frame your spiritual experience and create some structure around it so that you
Oh
don't
yeah.
miss that time. Time
Yeah.
with God is so important. And then connection with community can overflow from that time with God.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the connection you're talking about. I mean, my wife and I have gone to church. We don't go necessarily all the time. And I'll say for me, like you can call it gratitude meditation, gratitude prayers, whatever you want to say. But I do it in the morning and at night and then often during the day. So I'm more on the spiritual side, but it's still the same piece that you're talking about too, Amy. I mean, you wanting to go and connect with the pieces that you feel like works for you in a church and the other ones, you're not throwing the entire thing out with the bathwater by saying, oh, well, I don't agree with these things. We should all be able to, in our own communities, find different kind of commonplace areas to try and get along. There's conversations. My wife and I went to the beach this weekend, and there's conversations where I don't know why they even started the way that they did, but I mentioned that I stopped drinking alcohol. I didn't realize that the guy that I was talking to had physically died at a restaurant and had stopped drinking alcohol because of it. And I didn't realize that. And
Wow.
I shared with my experience because I was just like, I don't know, this feels like I should share it. And then his wife, who is having a little bit more trouble putting down the bottle. She's more of the partier. She can see that it's health. And he even asked me, he's like, Adam, why did you stop drinking? Was it health reasons? I'm like, well, my wife stopped because of health reasons. I just didn't want to make the time. He was like, what? I'm like, I just didn't want to make the time anymore. Like I'd run out of reasons to why I wanted to do it. And I drank quite a bit. So, it was more of a mental thing for me. And as my wife could tell you, like as soon as I make up my mind to do something, like it's already happened. It doesn't really matter. Um, I say that to say I would have had no idea looking at him on the street whether that be a conversation or not. And at the end, his wife was like, "I'm really happy I met both you and your wife. This is inspirational because she, for her own reasons, we didn't tell her to stop. We didn't tell her to keep going. She's deciding for herself where she wants to go."
Wow.
You can find that interaction anywhere, either in a church, which I think is a beautiful thing to do for those people that like that, or on the street, or anywhere. You're nailing it, I think, Amy, that we really should try and give each other a better shake of trying to get to know each other. We don't all have to be friends. We don't have to, pick out a summer cottage together. Like we don't have to be that, but we can at least try and break some bread together. I think it's great that you bring it up.
That's exactly it. And having lived through, like, the best way for me to describe what I lived through in, like, what we talked about with the standing against the shot, losing a lot of friends,
Yeah.
mean emails, blah, blah, blah. I came to a point which I think was a wonderful lesson for me, which was like living without having anybody extend any grace to me.
Right.
Even my closest, some of my closest relatives, it was very tough.
Yeah.
And and I'm not a victim. I was a victor in it, and I was a student of it.
Right.
And I'm saying this because I know what it feels like. And I know what it feels like to not have anybody that you really need some grace from in a tough moment, to not have any of them extending any grace to you.
Yeah.
It was like, ow. And so what has it done? It's been like, God, I really need you more than I even thought. And I had God all along, but this is different. This is deeper.
Right.
It's like, God, I really need you, and I really need you because I wish to extend grace to others. I wish to extend the grace that I once needed. I'm not perfect at it, but it's so important. And it's how we're all going to heal. Like, for someone to be listening to this, to acknowledge it's not an accident that you're hearing it right now.
Right.
And for you to bring to mind the person in your mind who's the toughest person to extend grace to.
Right.
And then to think about just even like sending them a handwritten note, or just anything that reflects God's love.
Yeah.
Because that's what we must do everywhere. We must ask God, as you understand God, like, please, God, help me to reflect your love. Everywhere I go, I stop in my car and I just say, please, God, help me to reflect your love while I'm here. It changes everything, because if you're thinking about that, you're not thinking about any like have tos. You're not burdened by time constraint. You're like, there might be someone in this store as I get to run my errand. There might be someone who needs your love. It's not even me. It's just coming through me. And when you can have that interaction, then, like you said, having that synchronistic moment, it's like she probably went on and was fortified and fueled to continue that commitment.
She was.
To that fasting, abstinence from. And so it's like, do I want to, am I helping or hurting? It's that simple. Right. It's like, can I help? Can I help fortify someone else spiritually? Yeah. And the more we're all doing that, the quicker we're going to heal, and the quicker people will come out of this hoodwink.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Amy, very, very much. Hang on for a couple minutes when we conclude this. Just make sure everything uploads. Amy, thank you for making the time and for talking about all the myriad of things that you have today. We'll see if YouTube keeps us. I know Rumble and Spotify will, so, but we'll see.
Thank you. And thanks for holding the space that just made it so possible.
You're very welcome. I'll put all the links from you out on our podcast as well, and I'll share this with you. I think we do that. I'll send it over to you with the clips if you want to use them. If you do, great. If you don't, that's okay too. Hang on for a moment, and everyone, thank you very much for holding space with us too. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.